You are 17 years old, in your Christian village in the Balkans, when the Ottomans arrive at your doorstep, but they are not there for coins or tribute. They are here for collection. They have come for you. Officials file in with a ledger already open to your name. The road that begins at your threshold will not return to it. The Ottoman Empire lasted for centuries and continents and controlled the fate of many. We praise its magnificent architecture and strategy, its sultans and calligraphy. But behind the golden facades of palaces and the glory of conquest lay sexual practices documented in calm ledgers and cold orders. These weren't isolated incidents or cultural misunderstandings. They were systematic policies that turned human sexuality into an instrument of control and exploitation. The documents are calm when they should not be. Registers, orders, prices, petitions, diplomatic reports. What follows draws on administrative registers, court material, diplomatic reports, traveler's notes, and archaeology. These are not one-off stories. They are procedures that govern lives for generations. The chilling part is not only what happened, but how methodically it was arranged. Ledgers, rotations, staffing charts, procurement routes, even castration supply networks for palace service. Those files sit in archives, waiting for readers willing to face them. If careful, source-driven history matters to you, please subscribe and tell us where you're watching from. It makes work like this possible. Back to the story. The clearest window into the machine is the devshirme, often called the levy or blood tax. Every few years, officials swept through Christian districts in an operation they themselves labeled collecting. They were not collecting goods, they were collecting people. The method was efficient and cold. Teams arrived with registers listing each household, how many late adolescent and young adult males, 17 to 20, were available, and when that village last met its quota. It was bookkeeping over human lives. Selection was methodical. Inspectors judged health, build, and composure like buyers at a horse fair. These recruits were not being sent to die in fields or mines. They were routed to the places where the empire concentrated intimate power, palace schools, and elite corps. The most promising were moved into the palace. There, conversion, renaming, and training began for service closest to the Sultan. The point was not merely to acquire servants. It was psychological reconstruction. Recruits were separated at once from anyone who spoke their language. Birth names could not be used. Family talk was forbidden. Language, memory, and belief were overwritten by program until the old self felt like a rumor. Service started with ceremony and schedule. You learned ranks, routes, and the order of rooms. Silence was drilled until it sounded like virtue. From the first roll call, private life became regulation. Touch by permission, proximity by assignment, companionship by roster. Intimacy translated into duty. The design was simple. Aim every hope upward and make the rest small. The domes and banners that crowned the capital were paid for by this structure. Some recruits rose through discipline and favor. Others bent under the arithmetic of price. Everyone was counted. Paper moved first, people followed, and the balance sheet decided who slept where and with whom tonight. The paperwork shows everything in sequence. Village lists, staging posts, transport routes, tutors assigned, conversion lessons, clothing issued, rations allotted. Penalties appear in neat margins for using the old language or writing to family. Even renaming is itemized. Birth name struck through, new name entered with a date and unit. None of this reads like rumor. It reads like policy executed step by step over many years. Let's begin with the part that shows how the system worked from the inside. Recruits taken through the levy were sorted. The most promising, late adolescents and young adults, 17 to 20, went to palace schools. Others to elite infantry. The aim was not only labor, it was the management of bodies, names, and desire. Inside the palace, training was total. New language, new prayer, New etiquette, silence in corridors, eyes forward. You learned how near to stand, when to kneel, when to vanish. Proximity was assigned. Companionship was scheduled. Nights were allocated by order, not by choice. This was intimacy turned into administration. Many of the strongest went to the Janissary Corps. Celibacy rules cut ties to property and family. The oath bound loyalty to the ruler alone. Within the Corps, relationships formed under supervision. Commanders understood that attention and favor could be routed through beds as easily as through ranks. The Empire even organized a dedicated formation, Cheval Battalion, to manage these attachments so they strengthened discipline rather than disrupted it. For palace service, the hierarchy ran through eunuchs. Operations were sourced along routes in Egypt and the Horn of Africa, where castration was contracted out and then supplied to the capital. Mortality on the route was catastrophic. Only a fraction survived. 2 tracks recur in the files. Men fully castrated, often Africans, placed near the women's quarters, and men castrated in part, often from the Balkans, placed in administration. Both carried authority. Both lived under constant surveillance. The palace staged entertainment as policy. Adult performers, Kochek dancers, and musicians were trained for festivals and banquets. Crowds blurred show and desire. Fights broke out. When violence followed the music, regulations tightened and public performances were curtailed. But the rule behind the rule remained. Bodies were programmed to affirm power. Beyond public show lay a discreet corridor. No register describes plainly. Select adult attendants, valued for beauty, polish, and silence, were placed for the private use of high officials. No rank to climb, no lawful protection to claim. The placement existed to gratify, to bind, and to keep quiet. Separation was the first instrument of control, and it never stopped working. Recruits were moved far from their regions. Letters were forbidden. The new language swallowed the old. Birth names fell out of use. Talk of home risked punishment. Conversion was framed as progress, forgetting as virtue. Within a year, memory felt unreliable, like a story told by someone else. The system turned loss into labor and labor into loyalty. Advancement depended on reading appetite at the top and adjusting to it. Those who adapted rose. Those who stalled were reassigned or sold. Paper decided paths. Rosters, audits, notes of favor, notes of fault. The cycle renewed itself with efficiency. Men who survived training would ride with officials back to districts like the ones they had left, and point out the next group of promising youths for collection. Victims became selectors. Selectors became examples. The machine did not only use the body, it rewrote the mind so the body would walk itself back into the harness. All this was recorded in handwriting. Units, posts, rations, fines, transfers. The words are small. The meaning is not. Here is the point the files refused to say aloud. Sex, service, and status were braided together, and the braid held the empire tight for long centuries. Beyond the levy stood a market. Istanbul and provincial hubs sorted people the way ports sorted grain. Categories, inspections, prices that moved with supply. Registers grouped captives by origin, language, training, and expected service. Versatility raised value. A woman who could manage stores, teach juniors, sing at table, keep accounts, and attend at night brought more, until age changed the math. Training centers polished posture and presence. Tutors drilled music, massage, conversation, textiles, and household management. Instruction extended to evening companionship for adult patrons of rank. The same hands that balanced ledgers were expected to perform at a nod. For a few, court life beckoned. Rooms where attention could lift or drop a future in a day. Favor raised, a glance ended careers. Surveillance never slept. Harem invited fantasy. The record stayed cold. These were managed spaces with budgets, ranks, inventories, and discipline. Alliances formed and failed under watchful eyes. Some women mothered princes and shaped politics. Many more aged into thrift, uncertainty, or resale to other work. Children born to enslaved mothers belonged to the owner. Separation appeared as a short line in a long book. Law set the hierarchy in plain terms. Assault against a free woman could merit death. Assault against an enslaved woman became damages. Loss priced as property to an owner. Consent for the enslaved had no practical standing. When punishment turned public, humiliation often came first, so the crowd learned before the blow that finished it. Justice performed itself as theater. Hold one counting room in view. A clerk squared his inkwell and wrote 3 quiet lines. Clothing issued, a doctor's fee for a fever, a bracelet sold to cover both. The handwriting was neat. The person between the lines moved from storeroom to table to chamber without speaking. After the meal, a supervisor expected a song. The ledger and the performance explained each other. Still, people found each other. A matron slid a folded scrap at a fountain. A singer steadied a younger woman's breath when the throat nodded. A storekeeper hid a coin in a hem and showed the trick to a friend. Quiet help rarely entered the files, but survival left shapes where ink could not go. Foreign observers wrote home with outrage and theater. Some condemned, many renamed it custom. Commerce encouraged forgetting. A city that bought from a port adjusted its conscience to keep the ships coming. Neighbors copied rather than resisted. Influence traveled on roads profit paved. Keep the economics plain. Trafficking revenues paid soldiers, repaired roads, and funded construction. Receipts for people sat beside receipts for timber and grain. The same hand totaled them. Versatility was praised because it reduced risk and steadied yield. When age lowered price, resale shifted a life to mills, workshops, kitchens, boats, or harsher hands. The spreadsheet did not say mercy. It said balance due. To tell this is not to deny agency. People bargained, maneuvered, refused, endured, and sometimes won small, decisive mercies. The weight stayed. Arithmetic pressed every choice. When memory proved inconvenient, it was renamed. When grief slowed output, it was filed as inefficiency. Bright voices survived because brightness was safer than truth, and safety could buy one more day. The record is dry, but the pattern is clear. Markets, law, and rooms arranged intimacy for power, year after year, across provinces. Normalization is the quiet genius of coercion. When buying and assigning people is visible in daylight, children learn prices before law. Sermons and speeches dress hierarchy as duty. Parents near the frontier plan for collectors like weather. Hide the able, move at rumor, store seed for a spring that may not come. Money binds the machine. Trafficking revenue pays soldiers, repairs roads, funds festivals, and underwrites domes. Palace budgets balance human accounts beside timber and grain. Treaties tuck clauses for exchanging persons next to customs and tolls. Border raids calculate expected captures with fodder and powder. Draw trade maps for people, not goods. And the arrows thicken where you expect. Documentation resists forgetting. Ledgers list ages, origins, prices. Inventories number women like furniture. Correspondence compares staffing preferences with a calm that stings. Courts price harm to persons as loss to owners. Diplomatic packets describe and then soften to keep business smooth. Foreign observers explain what they saw, and then explain it away as custom. Convenience edits conscience. Archaeology adds what files omit. Shackles near harbor walls. Beads in drains. Tools in storerooms. Bones that show labor and lack. Genetics traces movements no clerk recorded. Together, they build a map of what people did to other people and how long the echoes last. The archive does not heal. It testifies. Decline does not erase habits. It disperses them. In the 19th and early 20th centuries, older structures shrank, slipped under new labels, or moved under other flags. The injuries traveled in bodies and trust. People who survived learned caution that looked like coldness. People who profited learned authority that mistook obedience for love. Children inherited silence as strategy and passed it on because quiet felt safe. What do we do with this? Name the paperwork as power. Forms and files make violence look clean. Notice how neighbors adjust when trade is at stake. Influence is contagious. So is convenience. Keep persons visible inside systems built to blur them. Use words that hold a life in view when the ledger tries to reduce it to entries and totals. This is not an accusation against modern nations or faiths. It is a study in power and habit. Given reach and time, institutions turn intimacy into infrastructure unless someone says no and keeps saying it. Dignity is not a luxury. Once traded away, it takes generations to buy back. Laws matter, but so do budgets and everyday phrases that train people to accept the unacceptable as normal. Hold one last scene, an archive stairwell, a box number, a cotton string, a ledger that smells of dust and oil, a line about a person who does not speak in the file and cannot answer now. The handwriting is careful. The figures add. The room is quiet. You close the cover and feel the weight of what a calm page can hide. The last Sultan fell in 1922, near enough to touch through a grandparent's memory. This story is closer than it looks. If the record should be read aloud, subscribe, share this with one person who trusts neat paperwork more than lived testimony, and meet us in the next episode. We will keep reading the files until the euphemisms fail and the record can no longer pretend to be truly kind.